everybody. My name is Philip Campbell. I am the co-founder and CEO of Ascent Industries. So a few things about Ascent. We were started publicly trading on the Canadian Securities Exchange in August of this year. So we've been trading for about 2.5 months right now. And the reason that we're on the Canadian Securities Exchange, as some of you already probably know, but it's important for those of you who don't know why we're on the CSE rather than the TSX or the TSE, is because we have assets in the United States. So we have operations in Oregon, Nevada, and in Canada. And companies that have assets in the United States aren't able to list on the major exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, Toronto Stock Exchange, and so on. The Canadian Securities Exchange, they do allow cannabis companies that touch the leaf in the United States to be able to trade on their market. So that's where we're trading currently. The thing that's important to note about that in regards to our company, we're one of just a very few companies that are multi-state and multi-country. A lot of the companies that you're going to hear from at this conference and that you've heard from in the past, they've chosen to operate in only federally legal jurisdictions like Canada, Germany, Denmark, and so on. As many people are aware, currently in the United States, cannabis is still a Schedule I narcotic, and you're not able to get federal licenses, bank, and things like that. It's very difficult. And that also applies to the exchange. So you're not able to trade on the large stock markets and stock exchanges, as I said. So from an investor perspective, if you're willing to accept that risk, as we all know, at some point they are going to change the legislation in the United States. They will legalize it. They will make it federally legal. At that point in time, when that does happen, there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines in the US waiting to come into the capital markets, waiting to invest into cannabis companies. It's our belief that the companies that are licensed both in the United States, in Canada, and in other markets are going to be the most desirable companies for them to make their investments into. Companies that are currently not participating in the US, it's the largest cannabis market in the world. California, which is now just rolling out their program, it's about 40 million people. It's more than Canada, and by a population base of users, it's more than the German market, because currently Germany is restricted to only medical cannabis products. So some of the things that I think are important to note about our company, the reasons why we think that we're different, you're going to hear from a lot of companies, and a lot of great companies are going to be presenting at this show, as you've already heard from, and you will hear from tomorrow. These are the things that we think identify our company and what makes us different. So we have we have an experienced team. So that's one of the unique things about our company is that we have people who have cannabis experience. Cannabis has been legal in Canada since 2001 with a patient caregiver system. And so we have people, myself included, who've operated under that caregiver system. So have experience actually growing cannabis, extracting it, manufacturing products, and selling them into the medical market in Canada. A lot of other companies, they come from other industries into the Canadian cannabis market. So they come from pharma, from banking, agriculture, other areas. So we actually have a team that's got experience within the cannabis industry. We have an international platform. Like I said, we're one of just a couple of companies that have licenses both in the US and in Canada. We're pursuing licensing in Denmark as well, and I'll touch on why I think that Denmark is really the better opportunity in the European market currently. I think long-term the German market is going to be very desirable, of course, but in the short term, I think, as Natasja said in her slide, that the Danish market is a bit clearer, a bit more certain, and the execution is more certain in that marketplace. We have established brands. We've been selling recreational products into the United States for a couple of years now. So we already have established brands, processes, procedures, packaging, marketing materials, all of those things that go into bringing a product to market. We've already done that. A lot of cannabis companies in Canada currently, they're talking about doing it. They're implementing these systems, these processes, packaging, all of these things that you need to do in order to bring a product to market. They're doing that now. We've already done that for a couple of years. We have a proven execution record, licensing in 3 jurisdictions last year. So far this year, received our dealer's license in Canada. We have industrial scale. That's one of the things that hasn't yet happened in the cannabis industry. Obviously, every other major industry has industrialized and turned global. In the cannabis industry, it's been very regional so far with smaller markets. Now with Canada legalizing federally with a limited number of licensed producers, the opportunity to scale the business is now. And we've been focused on that for almost 2 years now. So we're in a very good position to really capture a lot of market share, not just within the Canadian market, but also in international markets as they open up by leveraging that scale that we have. We've been focused on research and development. When we first incorporated the company, we identified that as a tremendous opportunity. So that was over 5 years ago. We've been working with Simon Fraser University, which is a leading university in Canada, for 5 years now. So we have a number of different research initiatives that are proprietary that we've been able to garner through that research, which I'll touch on later. A number of key partners, some of whom are going to be presenting at this conference as well, and technology leadership, which is something that I don't think a lot of cannabis companies talk about, but it's something that we recognize as a huge opportunity with our company. We've invested a significant amount of capital and resources towards that. So, as the previous presenter, Daniel, was saying, the first thing that they look at is the team. Obviously, as an investor, you're investing into the management and into the people that are running the business. And I find myself very fortunate to be surrounded by an incredible group of people. This is only one slide, so we're only able to capture 6 people. If you have a chance to go onto our website and take a look at some of the VPs and other people that we have in our team, we have a number of PhDs, master's degrees, 3 lawyers on staff. So we have a really great qualified team. But to go through the 6 people on the slide, myself, I have 17 years experience in the cannabis industry, which is fairly unique, also with a business degree. My partner Reed has been an advocate for cannabis and legalization in Canada for 17 years as well. We've been working together. James is our business development officer. He's just a workhorse. The guy gets a lot of work done. He's been very instrumental in some of the licenses we've been able to secure. Krim is our chief legal officer. He has over 25 years of experience in capital markets. He's a licensed attorney in Canada, both in Ontario, BC, and also in the US. We're a cross-border company, so it's important to have a legal officer who's able to navigate both sides of the border and make sure that we stay safe as far as regulatory compliance is concerned. The cannabis industry is going to be about brands. So far it's been very vertically integrated. Companies have been focused on all parts of the value chain. As I'm sure many of you have already identified, brands are going to be what ends up winning the industry. It's going to be people who focus on delivering consistent, reliable products to consumers. And we're very fortunate to have Chris Lee as our Chief Marketing Officer. He's got over 20 years experience in marketing, ran his own advertising agency with offices in Toronto, LA, and Vancouver. And he's got experience working for very large companies, Pepsi, Toyota, Adidas, and so on. And last but not least, we have Blair Jordan, who's our Chief Financial Officer. He's got 20 years experience in the capital markets, working for Credit Suisse and Echelon Wealth Partners, and he has a Master's of Business and also a law degree as well. So we're very fortunate to have a really great team of people to be able to work with. I learn something new every day, and I'm very fortunate to be able to share this business with them. As I said, there's a lot of companies currently that are focused on the federally legal jurisdictions, like Germany, like Canada, Denmark, and so on. There's very few companies, I only know of one other company actually, that is licensed in Canada and in the United States. And so that, I think, positions us very favorably to build a global cannabis company. The United States market is the largest cannabis market in the world right now. And there's very few companies that are targeting both the Canadian market and the US market, and we're very well positioned. As you can see from the map there, we have currently facilities in Canada, 3 of them. We have Agrima Labs, Agrima Botanicals, and Agrima Meadows. The 3 facilities, I think, are very well positioned strategically and geographically. They're within about 15 minutes of each other. The lab facility is a 40,000 square foot extraction manufacturing facility where we focus on just a few key products to do them to scale. The Agrima Meadows facility is a 600,000 square foot greenhouse with 4,000 lights. So it's about 60,000 square meters and can produce about 60,000 kilograms per year on a conservative basis. That's 100 grams per square foot per year. And Agrima Botanicals, that's where our existing facility is now. It has a dealer's license and a licensed producer license as well. And it's a bit of an incubator where we can do a little bit of everything out of that facility. The 2 licenses we have in the United States currently are in Oregon and in Nevada. Those markets are distinctly different from each other, but the thing that really benefits us as a company is that we're actually selling adult use products into adult use markets right now. Obviously, on Wednesday last week, Canada legalized cannabis as the first G20 country to do so. Very few of the companies that are actually participating in that landscape have actually made products and sold them into the adult use market. As we can see from the market data from the United States, places like Colorado, Washington, Oregon, over half of the revenue is derived from non-flower sales, so from consumer packaged goods or CPGs. And because a lot of the companies in Canada haven't sold into those markets yet, they don't have that experience building and selling those products into the recreational marketplace, and we actually do have that experience. So while a lot of companies now are focused on developing those products, we've already developed them, we've already sold them, and we already have all of those things in place now. The reason that we went after Denmark as our first entry into Europe is because of the regulation certainty and clarity that exists there. In Germany, there's only 13 tenders that you can win, 200 kilograms per tender. There's a lot of big companies competing for those licenses that are very, very well capitalized. And for us, we wanted to have execution certainty. When you look at the Danish market and you look at that great graph that Natasja put up earlier, you see that the Danish market allows for more product formats, there's an open window to apply for your licensing, and that it's a much more transparent regulatory environment with which to get your licensing in place. So for us, being able to manufacture products in Canada at scale, export them into the Danish market to get approved in Europe as European products with the European Good Manufacturing Practices certification, and then being able to distribute them domestically within Denmark, but also export them into other markets like Germany, the United Kingdom, was a strategy that we took because we felt that that was the most efficient use of our capital, of our resources, and had the highest execution certainty. So that was the approach that we decided to take with regards to the European market entry. Now, as I said earlier, consumer packaged goods are going to be what defines success in the market. Currently, most companies are vertically integrated in Canada, but that's because of the regulations and the way that the industry has developed over the last 5 years in the Canadian marketplace. As the market starts to mature, it's going to fragment, and companies are going to focus on different parts of the value chain. And for us, because we see that the market, once it does get to maturity, we believe that there's going to be 70 to 80% of the market is going to be from non-flour sales, so consumer packaged goods. And if you consider that 80% of the market is going to be consumer packaged goods, then really focusing on that early is going to be essential. And that's also where the margins are going to be made, because when there's 80% of the market from consumer packaged goods, all of the raw material that goes into making those products is an oil. So when you extract that oil, it's no longer based on the strain or based on the potency or other things like that. It's based on the cannabinoid content of the oil. And so the lowest cost input to make that oil is really going to help to drive the margins of the consumer packaged goods companies. You know, the analogy that I always use is that everybody knows Starbucks and the mermaid that's on the cup of Starbucks, but nobody knows any of the farmers who farm the beans for Starbucks. And that's what's going to happen in the cannabis industry once it reaches maturity. The farmers, while they provide a very valuable part in the supply chain, they often are overlooked in favor of the companies that focus on consumer packaged goods. So when we went about developing our brand portfolio, what we did is we strategically segmented the market into distinctly different demographics. And the reason we did that is because cannabis consumers are different. You have somebody who is diagnosed with a serious illness, they're looking for something more in line with the pharmaceutical type of packaging, something clean, something trustworthy, something in line with the pharma type of package and label. When you look at the adult use market, which is what I prefer to call it rather than recreational, the consumers are much more varied compared to the medical market. You know, your marketing can be more fun, more colorful, more lively, at least in the United States, not so much in Canada, but you can certainly leverage different brands, different marketing strategies by having different products and brands that target different consumers, and it avoids some of the confusion and allows you to have customized brands for specific segments of the market. So that's the approach that we took with segmenting our brand strategy rather than a master brand strategy like some other companies may choose to do. So Ascent is our parent company, as you can see in the middle. Agrima is our medically focused product. Quarry is a product for the younger demographic, more of the connoisseur, your daily consumer, you know, your 19 to 35-year-old typical male consumer. Grace Notes is a very high quality edible line. Toko is a vape pen for toking on the go. New is a nutraceutical line, which is kind of, you have your pharma, nutraceutical, and then adult use. And so that is the approach we took with New, more of the cannabinoid wellness type of products. And Green Screen is a testing service that we offer for determining the sex of the plants, whether they're males or females. So what we've done here is we've taken a strategic approach to the markets as well. So every cannabis market is different. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. And it's really important that you understand all of those differences before you decide to target a certain market opportunity within that jurisdiction. And you know, the best example I can give is Oregon, Nevada, and California. So when we approached the Oregon market, we decided not to get a cultivation license because we foresaw that there was going to be an oversupply of cannabis on the marketplace and the prices were going to compress. and that the margins would also compress as a result. And when we went to get licensing in Oregon, the wholesale price of outdoor flower was about $1,500 US per pound. And now currently we can buy flower for less than $200 per pound because they had a very, very large oversupply last year that they're still actually selling. It was about a 5-year supply that was produced last year with outdoor product. As a processor, that's really great for us because it means our cost of goods becomes cheaper and our margins increase, which was the strategy that we predicted, and sure enough, that's how it's played out. In Nevada, there's a limited number of licenses. In Oregon, there was no limit on the number of licenses, so there's over 1,200 farmers and 600 almost dispensaries. In Nevada, there's only 90 or so cultivation licenses, about 60 processing licenses, and 60 dispensaries. So we hold 1 cultivation license and 1 processing license. In that marketplace, because of the limited supply of licensing, it limits the amount of product that's in the market. It creates a higher price point, higher margins for flower. So in that marketplace, it made sense for us to get a cultivation license, so we did. Nevada legalized at the same time as California in 2016, November. And our assessment of the market at that time was that California was the best long-term opportunity due to its size and its notoriety with brands and building successful companies there. But Nevada has a lot of experience in regulating taboo industries like alcohol and gaming. And so we predicted that there would be a much faster regulatory approach to getting licensed. And sure enough, they were the fastest state to go from the vote to the first sale of legal cannabis. Adult use cannabis, that is. In California, it took a lot longer for them to figure out their regulatory system. They're notorious for over-regulating industries, and we predicted the cannabis industry would be no different. And sure enough, it's taken them about 1.5 years to get their system in place. It's now still going through some challenges, and so now is a point in time where we think it's a good opportunity to pursue the California licensing, and that's something that we're actively pursuing currently. We sell 40 different products in Oregon. In Canada, the system is much different. Again, it's really important to understand your market. So in Canada, we're selling to the provincial distribution system, who then sells to dispensaries. If you look at the alcohol market in Canada, it's set up the same way, where consumers are buying from the provincial distribution system. And why that's important is because in order to sell to the province for liquor, you have to have very, very high volumes available to be able to sell to them. To get approved by the BC government, it takes 12 to 18 months. To get approved by the Ontario government, it takes 18 to 24 months. And you have to be able to provide a lot of inventory in order to get those supply contracts. And we think that the cannabis industry, once it gets more mature, is going to be in the same realm. And so for us, being able to provide large volumes of product to be able to meet that national demand is essential to building a national brand presence. If you have small quantities of products available across a whole number of different product ranges, you can't build a national brand for those products. And so for us, what we want to focus on is doing things to scale with massive industrial production. So to that effect, we have a 40,000 square foot, 4,000 square meter roughly, extraction manufacturing facility. It's almost done construction with phase 1, so we've got the first 20,000 square feet built out. We're expecting licensing by the end of the year for that facility. And we're focused on just 5 key products out of there initially. So we're doing flower, which can be sold both into medical and into the adult use markets. And then on the medical side, we're doing gel caps and tinctures. And on the adult use side, we're doing vape pens and pre-rolls. And so, you know, in Canada, there's a lot of speculation and excitement about beverages. A lot of people are very excited about that market opportunity. We try to be very data-driven and look at as much information as possible to be able to see where we want to focus our resources. And so we subscribe to BDS Analytics and Headset, which are data market aggregators based out of the US. They take all of the sales data from all of the different states. And currently, Colorado, which has the most mature cannabis market to get your information from, beverage sales account for just less than 1% of the market. So for us, we want to focus on markets that have larger market opportunity, and the beverage market may prove to be a very great opportunity if they allow for consumption places like vape lounges and other bars and restaurants, if that can be distributed through those places. I think that would be a great market opportunity. But knowing that it's less than 1% in Colorado currently, there's obviously other factors to consider in Canada, that it is going through provincial distribution and so on. We're focusing our efforts on the bigger pieces of the pie. So vape pens are typically 15 to 20% of the market. Pre-rolls are about 8 to 12% of the market, depending on what market you're in. So that's why we chose those products initially for the Canadian adult use marketplace. When it comes to the medical products that we're selling, gel caps and tinctures, the reason we decided to manufacture those is because of the prevalence of those products in the existing pharmaceutical distribution system. They fit very nicely in line with distribution through pharmacies. Germany is distributing through pharmacies, as we all know. Denmark is doing the same thing. As new markets open up across Europe, having product formats that fit nicely with distribution through the pharmacies, we think is going to be essential. And when you couple that with our IP, or intellectual property, that we've been able to develop with a number of unique product formulations that we have for gel caps and tinctures, using other cannabinoids other than just THC and CBD, which we've heard a lot about today. But we also do formulations with CBN, which is really good for sleeping, and CBG, which is really good for inflammation, and some other properties as well. We think that having that product format is going to resonate really well with not just the consumers, but also with healthcare practitioners who want to have a wider offering of products to be able to target different ailments. So that's really the focus with the market in Canada. So as I mentioned, we've been researching with Simon Fraser University for 5 years now. We're fortunate to be able to keep 100% of the intellectual property that gets generated out of that research. A lot of universities, they keep some of the IP. If you commercialize it, you have to share it with the university. We're able to negotiate that we get to keep 100% of it. So some of the research we've been able to develop out of it is some patent-protected delivery mechanisms and formulations for cannabis. We currently have a couple of patents that are pending. We have some extraction formulations. We can manufacture over 40 different products: vape pens, pre-rolls, gel caps, tinctures, suppositories, topicals, chocolates, gummies, candies, shatters, waxes, crumbles, and so on. And so we have a number of those formulations which we've been able to develop, which I think is going to be key moving into the Canadian market as those products get sanctioned in the next year. And as we start to bring those products to market, we've already done it, and that really de-risks our business significantly compared to a lot of our peers in the Canadian marketplace, because we've already done it successfully in the United States. We have a plant tissue culture propagation system. So in most agricultural industries, they propagate all of their plants using tissue culture. It's a much more efficient, scalable, cleaner method of generating starting plant material. So that was one of the primary research goals that we started with SFU. As you can see from the picture on the right-hand side, that's scanning electron microscopy. So we're doing some really detailed research on the micro level, understanding what's happening at that level with the plant. Breeding and genetics, I think, is a really critical area to differentiate your product offerings by having very specific breeds and strains that are available for whatever your target market is, whether it's for mitigating any risks of contamination, powdery mildew, optimizing cannabinoid profiles, yields, and things like that. So breeding, I think, is essential to ensure profitability in the long term. Something we're fortunate to have a lot of research areas in, as well as a number of other things. So we have some preclinical trials of cannabinoid-based therapies that we're working on. So as I mentioned, we have this patent. It's currently patent pending. It's a way to isomerize THC into CBN. It's basically a way of saying we convert the THC molecule into the CBN molecule. With that conversion, we're going to take the CBN, do a clinical trial on sleeping, and then develop a cannabinoid-based sleeping product, which can then get a DIN number in Canada under the new system. There's a cannabis DIN, a drug identification number, which can be approved, and then it can get covered through the provincial healthcare system, as well as exported into other markets like Germany or Denmark or elsewhere. So, and we also have a water-soluble cannabinoid formulation. You heard earlier with TGOD that they have partnered with a company. We actually developed that in-house, so we do have a water-soluble cannabinoid formulation. The thing that's important about that is that THC, when you extract it, it's an oil, and oil and water don't mix very well. And so having a water-soluble delivery method is important because that will create consistency in the products that you're making. So when you're making a beverage, for example, you want to make sure that it's not separating and you have oil on the top and then the beverage underneath it. You want to make sure that it's evenly dispersed. And so this water solubility allows us to develop products like that if we so choose. We have a number of really great partners that we're able to put on this slide. A lot of them that didn't actually make it onto here. Aurora Cannabis, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. We have a supply agreement with them for our greenhouse. We can supply them with up to 20,000 kilograms per year of cannabis once that's fully licensed and operational. So it's a significant driver of revenue. We're also approved to sell to the BC Liquor Board, the Ontario Cannabis Store. We've been researching with Simon Fraser University for 5 years now. And we have some supply agreements with a couple of Australian companies. And we're working on a craft cannabis program. We're based out of British Columbia. Anybody who's heard of BC Bud, we're very well highly renowned for the quality of cannabis that we produce. It's often very craft cannabis, small to medium-sized growers. We've put together this craft cannabis program where we're able to take all of that production, give them some help and support in getting licensed and maintaining regulatory compliance, and then being able to take that product and sell it through our distribution channel. We think that that's going to be a very underserviced segment of the market in the Canadian provincial systems because it's limited to only 200 square meters of canopy growth. And so consumers currently in Canada are buying, if they go to the unregulated dispensaries, they're buying craft cannabis right now. They're not buying massive greenhouse grown cannabis or big business cannabis. They're buying it from the small mom and pop producers who are producing a variety of different strains or variety of different types of products and formats, and that's what consumers are used to buying. So we think that in the Canadian market, having a craft cannabis program is going to be essential because there is a huge demand for cannabis. That's what people are buying now. And so we want to try to replicate what's happening in the unregulated market in the context of a regulated marketplace. One of the things that I think is often overlooked or not discussed is technology. And I think that this is really critical in this emerging industry as it starts to globalize. And we all know that it's going to be a $100+ billion industry in 5 or 10 years from now. But nobody really knows exactly how the industry is going to play out, what's going to be important drivers of success or failure within your business. In any global business, in any industry, it's essential to have an enterprise resource planning software. For those of you who aren't familiar with what an ERP is, it's basically a digital backbone where you can plug in all of your different digital systems and databases into this one backbone, and then you can run business intelligence over top of it and also artificial intelligence over top of that. So to give you an idea of why that's important, we all have, we have a grow room, we have environmental data in there, temperature, humidity, lighting, things like that. We have our e-commerce site where people place orders and generate sales data from that site. We have a medical clinic where people come in and they get registered and they say that they have certain ailments. There's a lot of connectivity between all of those different databases, but if you don't have a system to actually allow them to communicate between each other, then you're really going to be at a disadvantage compared to companies that do. So you can see here, we can do all of our financial reporting, all of our seed to sale tracking, both in Canada, Oregon, and Nevada. We can do our human resources, our e-commerce, our WooCommerce, which is our sales automation that we use. We do the medical clinics that go into it, as well as a number of other digital systems that can be plugged into that framework. And then we can run business intelligence to see where we're operating profitably, where we need to look on things. If things are outside of our expectation, it'll notify us right away. So it's a really powerful tool. We have a roadmap. It's about a 3-year technology roadmap. One of the later integrations is artificial intelligence, and that will allow us to run millions of calculations a minute to see just random pieces of information, how they're correlated. Is there something there between things that you never thought about? And if you don't have a system to be able to collect and analyze that data, we think you're at a disadvantage. We've invested about $2 million and countless hours into that program so far. So, the capital structure of the company, I think some other things that are important to mention. As a co-founder, I've invested on every single private round that we've done, which is 5. I've got a lot of my own personal wealth invested into this company. So have our other co-founders. When we went to market with 315 million shares outstanding, and 250 million of those were free trading. So a lot of other companies, when they go public, they restrict the float of shares that are trading on the marketplace, and that creates an artificial limited supply of those shares, which then drives up the share price and then can lead to a lot of volatility, as we've seen with a number of the publicly traded cannabis companies. We actually came out with 250 million shares free trading, and we actually were able to appreciate. We started at 40 cents. We're trading in and around the 65 to 70 cent range currently. And the other thing I think that's important to mention on this is we have an employee stock option plan. So we thought that it was important that all of our employees become owners of the company. And so everybody who works for us, no matter what their position is, actually gets to benefit from the success of the company. We want to make sure that people are committed, that they share the same visions and values and things that are important to us. And so by offering the employee stock option plan to all of our employees, I think that's something that really benefits everybody. The last slide, we did start trading in August of this year. There's a number of catalysts that are on the horizon that we're looking forward to within the next 3 to 6 months. So things that are going to drive some shareholder appreciation in the capital markets. So we're currently waiting for our sales license in Canada. So we're going to be able to begin sales very shortly, we hope. We're also expecting our lab license for the 40,000 square foot extraction lab and for the 600,000 square foot greenhouse, as well as our license in Denmark. So just in the near future, we have a number of pretty critical milestones which are going to drive a lot of shareholder appreciation, which I think is good for people who are coming into the story now, as well as people in the future. The other thing to take from this is last year we were licensed in 3 jurisdictions. We got licensed in Canada, Oregon, and Nevada last year. This year we received our dealer's license in Canada as well. And so that converted to a cannabis drug manufacturing license on the 17th. And we're one of only 5 or 6 companies in Canada that currently holds a cultivation license and a dealer's license. So from that perspective, we're in pretty good standing as well. Disclaimers. Okay, thank you very much.